Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. We going live from Midtown, New York. I've wanted to do that since the beginning. You know, I was thinking about it earlier today. I wanted, like, one of my first episodes, I really wanted to mess with Sam. I know he'd get it. You might get this reference, but I totally wanted to introduce and go, "Good morning, Vietnam." Just to mess with everybody. Adrian Cronauer. That was like my biggest, I'd say, prior to like listening to Joe Rogan and Gary Vaynerchuk, my two biggest influences in what I wanted to do, like ever thinking about wanting to do radio, was Good Morning Vietnam and what was the Christian Slater movie? Pump Up the Volume. Happy Harry Hard On. Talk Hard. Do you remember that? You probably remember that, Tim.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen that?
No.
Oh, man. You're younger than I thought.
I'm ashamed of some of the movies I haven't seen in my life.
You're young for a bald guy.
I know. I've been 36 since I was like 23.
Oh, that's funny. And I'm still in my 20s. I just have a 40-year-old body. But, yeah, I've wanted to do that for so long. But I really wanted to mess with you. It was Sam Himmelstein's show, and I knew the both of you would get it, but I got shy. I'm not shy anymore.
You've never been shy.
I've never been shy. I don't know why I didn't do it. Maybe I just forgot. I was excited. That happens more often than anything, where I get really pumped and I got so many things going on and I got so much to say, and then I just forget. I'm like, fuck, I forgot to do that thing. That would have been so much fun. So whatever. It was 3 months late.
It was great.
I mean, thank you.
Yeah.
I might do it. It
worked out well.
But I like the other thing. Just live from Midtown, New York. Like Conan O'Brien.
Saturday night.
It's Friday afternoon. They probably record Friday afternoon. Anyways. Hi, everybody. How you doing? You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox, here with my buddy, Tim Tate. We'll get to him in just a moment. We're going to start with the message of the week. Today, we're taking it back. So I saw this a tweet earlier this week, and this lady was asking if you could change one thing, take one thing back, personally or historically, what would it be? And I thought for a second, I'm like, I'm cool with my own trajectory. I made mistakes, whatever. I own that. I'm cool with all that. But if there's one thing I could take back, and this makes me think of you, that I feel like would really potentially change the way the world behaves, is I would have prevented the untimely death of Bob Marley. That's one of the things I would take back. And so my quote today is by Bob Marley from an interview. I saw this when I was quite young. He probably did it in the late 70s, and I'm going to do my best to translate the patois and not. I thought about doing it in his little language, but I think I've quoted enough people today already. I've imitated enough people. What did he say? He said, "My life is for plenty of people. If my life is just for me, I don't want it. My life is here to help plenty of people." And later on, they released his son released a documentary about his life. Not that long ago, just a few years ago, and it debuted here in New York in some small theater. My wife and I went to see it, and one of his lady friends, Cindy Breakspear, the Miss USA or whatever back in the day, one of his baby mamas, she said something in the documentary, the same tone, that his goal was to do things that he knew were good for himself, but good for the world as well. So yeah, sure, he loved music, he loved to smoke weed, he loved to dance, he loved all these things, but he was like, but if everybody just does it, the world will be a better place for it, you know? And I think a lot of what you do and what you stand for and represent is the same thing. You have a little bit less hair.
A little bit. Yeah.
Your pigment's a little lighter than his. That beard, though, you got the beard, bro.
I'm working on it.
You got the Marley beard, Rasta. So, and it was fun because I was hired. We were just talking about music and my background in music, and in the early days, I was like 16, and I was hired to play for a working reggae band. I was living in Virginia Beach in Norfolk, Virginia at the time. It was like beach lifestyle, that kind of thing played off. And there were a lot of West Indians that moved there because it was work, they could live. But there were like all these like Caribbean themed venues, like just locally owned. I'm not talking about like the chains, just like local places. They put like fake palm trees and paint the exterior red, green, and gold. But there was work. But these guys, I don't know, they were a working band, and I don't know how they got a hold of me, but I ended up being their drummer, like the token white dude in the back.
That's where it's at.
But I learned a lot then, because at the time I was just like your average American consumer kid, like I ate fast food and I watched a bunch of television and I just didn't give a shit about anything, I didn't think about what I put in my body or anything like that. I was always athletic. I enjoyed, accomplishment physically as far as that goes. But those guys were like, they started to talk about ITAL living and the environment. And that was like the first I'd ever heard of it. This was like early 90s, I was just like, wait, what? We have to take care of we have to take care of the planet and our body? Like, damn, I was having so much fun. But I quickly adopted it. And like, that was life-changing for me. And going along, I always hoped to like fold some of that into what I did for a living. And what's really inspirational is meeting people like yourself and companies like Think Coffee that are doing it like big time. It's really inspirational. So thank you, Tim. Again, Tim Tate. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself, Tim?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, so, like I'm not a professional chief sustainability officer or
he
anything
just acts like
that.
One.
I've worked in food and beverage for most of my life. I started off as soon as I graduated from high school, I started working in restaurants, as a busser,
where'd you
a server,
You're from
Seattle, Washington area.
Seattle, yeah.
Yeah. That's like where.
That's why you're in coffee.
That's where coffee really began in the U.S. as far as, espresso wasn't really much of a thing. Cappuccinos, lattes,
culture,
that's where things grew from. Strangely enough, I didn't get into coffee until I moved to New York.
That makes sense.
But coffee's a flexible job. It's great for students. It's great for performers. That's what I went to college for here in New York. For music and theater.
Oh, really?
So yeah,
where'd you go to school?
I went to school at a community college in Washington. That was pretty well known for their jazz program.
I thought you were saying you went to school here.
And then I was doing some theater shows in Washington, and I wasn't really getting to the place. Like the professional development that I wanted in Washington State, and I got fired from a show that I was doing, and I was like, that's it, I've had it. I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to go
to a place where they really mess with people.
Yeah, I'm going to go like do.
I can get fired every day.
Yes, I'm just going to take like continued disappointment like 30 times a day for.
That's good. That's good for the soul.
Yeah,
man.
it really
Absolutely.
it really beats some discipline into
That's exactly
me.
what
Is
I
what it
moved to
did
New
to
York.
me.
Yeah,
New York, like
definitely.
Going to school for theater and for music, and then trying to make it professionally in this town, like really instilled like a major sense of work ethic into me. And I worked, I don't know how many hours a day, every day. I went to college, and
did you go to school
afterwards.
here as well?
I went to school at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy on the Upper West Side.
And when you were studying in Washington, you said jazz and theater. What were you? Was this for vocals or?
So I sort of fell in love with jazz, from like 6th grade on.
Wow.
I started playing. I
was in my 20s.
Yeah, I started playing saxophone. I was one of those weird teenagers who like loved jazz, and there are like hardly any of those in the world. Really, it's like jazz is the tiniest idiom of music. Really,
that's like all of Syracuse, New York. Like
like the biggest jazz stars, they have like 50,000 followers on Facebook or whatever. Where instead of like 4 billion,
and like sell the biggest one sell 50,000.
They hardly make any money.
Yeah.
Like you get into jazz because you love it, and like not because you have like these visions of grandeur. Like it's not gonna happen really, but. That's where my love for music really started. Traveling around to music festivals and competing in solo competitions, and somewhere like around when I was like 15 years old, I did the musical Oliver at a little community theater organization in my hometown, and I discovered like my next love in music, and I was like, and there's also this thing of trying to like be a human being on stage and conveying relationships to people, and like that brings this. You're still being a musician, but then you're bringing this other aspect in as well. And so I was a really kind of complicated teenager where I didn't have like one thing that I loved to do, and that's always sort of the way I've been like throughout my trajectory as a human.
That's great though. You shouldn't have like, that's silly. Just be like, do this one thing.
I don't know.
It.
I mean,
That's like me. I just do
I
one
give
thing.
I give
and-
props to people who like you've started more businesses than like anybody I know. Like you know, like
I don't know about
for a
that,
while
but-
I was calling you like the mayor of Windsor Terrace.
Oh, that's been done. You got to come up with a new name. I need a different because I'm apolitical. I'm not into politics at all.
No, you don't seem like a mayor at all.
No, I want to be more like a benevolent like mob leader. You know, like the capo of a family, but like
you're not scary enough.
we give
though.
out hugs.
Like, you gotta work on
Exactly.
that.
No,
Yeah.
like different. It's like no, we're not gonna fuck you up. We'll work this out.
Yeah.
You know, your kneecaps are safe, but
kill you
like,
with love.
but don't mess with me, man.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess like that's sort of how I've always been. Is like I have a lot of different things that I love to do. I love sports. I love music. I love theater. I love food. I love drinks. It's like, and these are kind of all things that I've sort of pursued in one way or another throughout my life. And like maybe some people say. Master of none or something because you're doing all these things, but
I don't subscribe to that.
What I hope is that having all these different interests and following them professionally really kind of adds up to something special.
Yeah, I have an old boss and mentor who I worked for this guy when I was like 17. And he's been very successful. He's now franchised his restaurants and he's opened in multiple states and he's a really heavy dude. And but he started young. He opened his first restaurant at like 23 or 24. I was almost 40.
Yeah,
when I opened mine.
Well, 40 is more the regular,
right? But I talk to him often, and he said to me, he's like, you're gonna peak at like 50 because you're just into so many things. And he's like, you're really good at all of them. It just takes you more time because you're constantly working on and folding in new skills. He's like, but it's just going to be a longer wait before you hit. But he's like, when you do, it's going to be full. And you don't need to eliminate anything. Because I would call him and be like, oh my God, like when am I going to like settle down? And he's like, you're not.
Yeah.
Just like do it. Just be you, boo. You know what I'm saying?
There's
That's
a lot
it.
to that. I think like I have a ton of respect for people who do choose like that one thing that they want to be truly great at and then follow that for their whole life. Like I have a lot of respect for that person, because that's not something I've ever been able to do.
No, it's not inherently me.
Yeah. So like those people, man, I got a lot of love for those people. Like my brother is that kind of person, he's worked for the same company for, 20 years now. And he's really like grown to be like one of the big leaders,
Great.
And so good for him.
Knock
That's
it out.
awesome.
No, you have to be yourself. Self-awareness is a really big part of it. And once I finally came to terms with that, because it was the same for me. Like when I was, 17 years old, I was running a restaurant and I was running a band at the same time. And ultimately it led to me dropping out of high school because I would get home at like 2:00 in the morning all the time. And I was having fun.
Yeah.
I was not a good student, I did fine. Like I tested really well. I knew the material. It was just like, this sucks. I'm making cash over here, and this is what I want to do. And I've been torn between those two specifically for decades, where I was like, I'm going to be a musician now. And then I'm like, no, I'm sick of that. I'm going to be a restaurant guy now. And I'm like, oh, I'm sick of that. I'm going to go back. And now I'm working on this fusion of all of it, in a way where they're still separate businesses, but I found ways to, it's just taken a long time. But I love this about the show though, where like I have guests on that I know really well. And like I've known you for years and I had no idea you had a music background.
Yeah. I never talked about it. It's weird.
It's awesome.
It's like this thing that I have in the back corner, that I don't talk about very often. I don't know, because like sometimes I feel like in the business community, like you bring up like theater, acting, like music, like
somehow
for some reason, like
you.
artistic pursuits sometimes don't add up to much in the perception of the business world.
They're like, you're not a serious business person.
Yeah, but I don't think people a lot of times realize like what goes into becoming like a solid artist
and the
of any
contribution
kind.
it makes to you
Absolutely
as a business-minded person. It's tremendous. Cool. Well, we'll elaborate on that a little bit more. We're going to take a little short break. You're listening to Entrepreneurial Web.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
Do you run or are ready to open your own business? Hi, I'm Jeremiah Fox. I've been operating and opening small business for the last 25 years, and I'm the host of the new show, The Entrepreneurial Web. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time for insights and stories on the nuances of running small business right here on Fridays at noon, talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
And we're back once again. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Lev, broadcasting live from Hell's Kitchen, New York City, here with my main man, Tim Tate. So I was just trying to recall how we met, actually, because I was talking about all this time I've known you. I didn't know you were in music. But
yeah,
did we first meet with Ramin?
We did, yeah. So,
Ramin Narimani. Intelligentsia Coffee. Guru.
Ramin, was with Intelligentsia Coffee forever. Now he's with a co-roasting company in Brooklyn. Ramin's an amazing guy,
and Matt's there now too. I think.
Matt Avedijian is also there. These awesome guys that I got to work with pretty regularly. So Ramin, 10 years ago, when I was working on coffee ice cream trucks with Van Leeuwen Ice Cream in Brooklyn, has had like this meteoric rise, kind of at the top of the ice cream game. I believe I was their first employee, or at least, operationally wise. So
mysterious.
And I interviewed with the Van Leeuwens in their Greenpoint kitchen, in their apartment, before they were even really like making their own ice cream. Kind of at the formation of that company. And so I worked for them for a few years, and we grew from 1 to 6 trucks during that time, and I was managing those 6 trucks, which is sort of like managing 6 stores with wheels that break down all the time and run out of product, and like 40 employees from like 6 a.m. to like 2 a.m. every day kind of thing.
Brick and mortar thinks they have problems, right?
Yeah, I mean, like
wheels,
people think that sometimes people are like, oh, we should start a truck. It'll be so much easier than an actual brick and mortar, but it's actually a lot harder, I would say.
Yeah, no, my places have never rolled away.
Yeah,
they're always where I left them.
Yeah, I mean, you have to worry about like the business owners who don't want you there, the city who doesn't want you there, like 80s postal service trucks that are like breaking down every day, and like like these are like the kind of things that I learned to troubleshoot, sort of like through working with that company.
I got to try this.
And I also learned that I don't think I necessarily want to start a food truck of any kind, at least in New York. Maybe like a stationary one that lives in one place all the time and is like sponsored by a building or something like that.
There's that like taco place in Fort Greene. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes,
it's just like,
I know exactly what you're talking. There's one in Williamsburg also that does
right.
something similar. A backyard, a food truck that's stationed there. Like that's a good idea,
right?
because that's just a kitchen.
Right.
And then you have a little
and
seating
it's
area
cute.
around
it's like
there.
a destination.
It does. It adds
yeah.
something nice and interesting to your establishment. I learned a lot about business through doing that. Like that was kind of that was really one of my first coffee experiences in New York as well. So Ramin was the first guy who ever trained me on espresso, like how to prepare espresso drinks. Yeah. So that was the thing with the ice cream trucks. Like they were killing it during the summer, just like lines around the block. Very innovative way to design a food truck, like a really beautiful thing that people just loved and wanted to go to. Of course, the ice cream was great as well. Like,
Yeah,
it was
fantastic.
awesome. But it was that visual element that really drew people in, and like warm. It was really warm yellow, butter yellow colors, and like illustrations on the menu board. And they were one of the first companies to ever make like a beautiful food truck, and that was really what grew that business right out of the gate. But during the fall, winter, spring, it's like people eat a lot of ice cream, but at home.
Yeah.
Like ice cream
standing
sales
outside
go
in January.
Yeah. I mean, this ice cream sales go through the roof, like in the grocery stores.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But in trucks, it's like, no, people aren't going to wait for ice cream. And so, they brought like really nice coffee setups onto 3 of the trucks. And, we were driving, like I was stationed a lot of the time at around 23rd Street and 6th Avenue. And like this experience, my first kind of everyday barista experience in New York, really like I think that I've always been a positive person for the most part. Working in that spot introduced me to like some of my best friends now today. Some of the best mentors that I have were introduced from that. That was kind of like the start of my growth as a person in the food industry. Started like on that corner.
Nice.
And so I feel like that was like a very important thing to me. Like if Van Leeuwen's are ever watching this, thank you.
I'll send it to him.
Yeah. So I mean,
this
but that was very important to me. Like I learned that inherently the vast majority of people out there are really great people. And
that's an interesting discovery.
It is
on a corner in Manhattan.
Like a lot of people,
I think they call that a good finder. That's being a good finder.
Like that experience like made me find like, like I think there's a lot of people who haven't worked in customer service, right? Like most
there's a lot of people that should.
There's a lot of people that should, absolutely. And this is why, like, for the good of people that are currently in customer service, yes. Also, for the good of those people to improve their outlook on humanity.
Yeah.
Like the vast majority of people want to have connection, want to be good to other people. Like you don't realize that sometimes when you're just like surrounded by millions of people and you're just like shoving your way through crowds and whatnot. But like when you have like a connection point with, it's like, wow, I've talked to like 100 amazing people today, and like maybe one person's been shitty to me or something. It's like that's wonderful odds.
Yeah, and I think what that scenario creates is the opportunity for service, and it's like what people really want is just to feel good.
Yeah,
they get that a lot through connection. But if there's just like one little thing you can do, and that's been the cornerstone of everything that we've done in Windsor Terrace, it's just like no matter what, when you leave here, I just want you to feel better than you walked in. Like I want you to feel good, whatever we have to do to accomplish that. And when you do that, it could change, because people definitely come in like not so happy, and it's like,
sometimes it doesn't take much to change someone's day.
Yeah, and you just have to let like whatever the mentor I was telling you about. One of the things he used to stress, and I was young, and it was great getting this message young, was like, leave your emotions at the door. Check your bags at the door. When you come in here, it's not about you. Like it's not you're not in here to fight with your coworkers and come in and posture and be like, this is that's not what it's about. It's about teamwork, and it's about making the other, the person, the receiver, happy.
Absolutely. I mean, that's hard.
And he ran a good ship, but he was effective at
it. That's really good advice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's difficult to do, though.
It's very difficult to do.
Especially if like you're a sensitive person,
right? It doesn't work for everybody, but
yeah.
I think if you teach people young, the odds of them being an adult that behaves that way is much better.
For sure. Like, I mean, I'm still learning to work
you always
this
do.
way.
Yeah. You always have to work on it.
It's hard. You run into so many things that happen to you every day that you never know what's around the corner.
Yeah. No, it's a muscle. You have to.
It is, and to like take that, like whatever happens to you, whether good or bad, and just like internalize it and like let it go, and not change the way that you're acting towards people. Like that's difficult,
Yep.
But that's great advice for sure. But yeah, I don't know where we're going with this, but
meeting Ramin and then how he connected.
Yeah, so we met through. So I have kind of this long story. So 10 years ago, at that time at Van Leeuwen, I had an idea for a business, and that was sort of like the first moment when I was like, oh, I feel this want and need to start a business. And I thought it was a great idea at the time. I still kind of think it's a good idea, but I wrote a business plan. I started pitching it to people. I didn't know anything about writing a business plan. I didn't know anything about trying to pitch it to people. I don't know how people raise millions of dollars for their businesses. Like it's incredible skill.
Be a nice guy.
Yeah,
just ask and ask nicely.
Well, asking is important actually, and sometimes it's hard to ask. And that actually is very simple advice, but probably like amazing advice. But you ask nicely, and then also have like a ton of data and really clear plans laid out.
I've never used data.
Like I know. Well, like these are like I don't. Yeah, data.
I use it
either.
now, but like at the beginning, oh my god,
it's something that's super important to people who are in those positions to like actually come in and help out. You know.
Yeah.
But so like at that point, I the business idea that I had to do with the bar industry. And I had never worked in the bar industry. I had worked at places that had bars, never worked behind the bar, didn't know very much about spirits. And so, I one of my customers at the time was a brand ambassador for Plymouth Gin. And he's this amazing guy. I always loved serving him, having him in the shop, by the truck in the shop. I was like, I'm really interested in bartending. Do you think that you could like give me some advice on, how I might sort of get my foot in the door in that community? And he, just because of what his position was, knew like the whole industry, like the whole New York bar world. And he knew some of the best in the business. And him and his wife, Georgia, got me an interview at Saxon and Parole on Bowery, which at the time it still is a really great establishment. Like they have one of the best cocktail bars. Like, they've won some accolades for that. And then Ghost Donkey, which is a part of that business, just won like Bar of the Year and Imbibe magazine. And, and then I interviewed with Lyndon Pride, who was the general manager at that time. And I was like, hey, I'm Tim. I'm really into coffee. I have been for a while, but I really want to learn about the bar industry. I'd be happy to like make coffee for you for a while. If you promise to like move me into the bar eventually. And so I started out as a barista during brunches, and the coffee station is directly next to the service station for the bar. So I started to get to know the bartenders, started to ask them, hey, what are those drinks you're putting out there? And the bartenders there are really knowledgeable, like super knowledgeable. Naren Young at the time was the bar director there. Naren's like legendary.
You're in good company.
Yeah, very much so. And so, I was like, I sat down with Naren after a while. I was like, look, I've been making coffee for a while. Naren has like a very in-depth training program. He brings in like world-class mixologists, people who make the spirits, historians, crazy
Did you ever meet David Wondrich?
I have met David Wondrich. Yeah,
I love his
a number of times.
Imbibe is so good. I like Punch too, but Imbibe.
Oh yeah, no,
Imbibe
Punch is awesome too.
Yeah, it's
Punch
great.
is really, really,
but
really
Imbibe
good.
literally changed my life.
Yeah, he's a great writer and just a wonderful human too.
Cool.
But yeah, so like I was like, all right, I'm ready to start learning more about the bar, and so he brought me on as a barback. I worked really hard as a barback, like crazy hard. I went to all the trainings, and then I had a chance to move over to the Daily on Elizabeth Street when they opened that. So I opened up this new awesome cocktail bar that was really kind of like rock and roll.
And it was the same company,
same owners attached to Public Restaurant, which was that company's sort of like breakout restaurant that made them famous, Africo. And so I got to know the bar industry. I got to know how to make great drinks. I got to know how to provide even better hospitality to people because of that. These things are always lead one thing to the next. I didn't end up raising the money that I needed for that business. I didn't end up starting that business, but I did end up starting a little coffee roasting business that I called Parkside Coffee Roasters. And I ended up selling coffee to some of this community that I had gained.
The Windsor Terrace Food Co-op.
Yeah, the Windsor Terrace Food Co-op. That's right.
And the Prospector.
Yeah, and and some restaurants around, like really quality spots around Manhattan. But I was doing that business sort of like on the down low, because to start a roasting business in New York can be like very capital intensive. You have to meet the city's requirements, the health department's requirements. It's like you need a lot of dough. And I didn't have it, so I was like, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it like on the DL. And I was doing it with borrowed space. I was working out of the corner of a wood shop. I was roasting coffee, and then I was packaging it in the basement of a coffee shop, and then I lost both of the spaces like simultaneously. And I was like, all right, I'm done with this. Let's at least like take a break. Maybe I'll come back to it at some point. And I had a chance to start doing tech work on coffee equipment, and that's how we met. So me and my buddy started. I had a chance to join my friend Trevor's repair company as a partner, and so that's how we met. Was I was repairing your coffee machinery
I feel like it was
at Fox and
that,
the Crate.
though.
We perhaps met just like walking around the neighborhood. But I feel like that's the first time, like in any like real capacity, we started to have like exchanges.
Well, speaking of break, we're going to take another one. What's up, Adam Wapniak? I see you there. How you doing, brother? All right, we'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network at www.talkingalternative.com. Now, broadcasting 24 hours a day. Talking Alternative.
Do you run or are ready to open your own business? Hi, I'm Jeremiah Fox. I've been operating and opening small business for the last 25 years, and I'm the host of the new show, The Entrepreneurial Web. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time for insights and stories on the nuances of running small business right here on Fridays at noon, talkradio.nyc.
Do you love or are you intrigued about New York City and its neighborhoods? I'm Jeff Goodman, host of Rediscovering New York, a weekly show that showcases New York's history and its extraordinary neighborhoods. Every Tuesday live at 7 p.m., we focus on a particular neighborhood and explore its history, its vibe, its feel, and its energy. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
I'm the aptly named host of Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. Big nonprofit ideas for the other 95%. Fundraising, board relations, social media. My guests and I cover everything that small and mid-sized shops struggle with. If you have big dreams and a small budget, you have a home at Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. Fridays 1 to 2 Eastern at talkingalternative.com.
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
And we're back. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox, here with my buddy Tim Tate, my coffee supplier. He's the guy that keeps the smile on my face. What's up, Elizabetta? It's funny. We were just talking about, Elizabetta, maybe you can share and shed some light on this. We were talking about Italian establishments in New York City who have access to some of the most amazing coffee in the world, but they use Illy and Lavazza, like pre-ground. Why? You have to, I'm sure it's nostalgia or something. I don't know. Elizabeth, we would love to hear from you. So
I could get in trouble for this conversation, probably.
It's all right. We can take him out. I choked him out. And Elizabeth, she got my back. We trained jiu-jitsu together. She's wicked. She's dangerous. So we were talking about how we met, but also like your beginning, your pursuit of your own endeavors and dreams, the entrepreneurial dream. You wrote a business plan for something involved in wine and spirits, not having a spirits background, ballsy.
Right.
You go to a dude with a really like dope place and training program, and you offer your services, not for free, but you're like, I'll start at the bottom. I'll make coffee. You teach me the bar. I'll be a barback. I'll work hard, which is that's old school. That's like apprentice style. And that's a great way to do it for those of you out there listening who are like, I don't know how to get started. Like, start small. Don't be like, I love these guys that are like, I'm going to make $1 million by the end of the year. And I'm like, what are you doing right now? And they're like, I'm looking for work. I host a podcast. Like, yeah, okay. Start reasonably, start small, don't be greedy, and know that there's a process. And so you adopted that. Your original business plan didn't work out. You needed funding. You need money. A little bit. Not always. Startups don't need money.
Startups only need like $300 million or something like that
Some
anymore.
of them, they're just like, I have a great idea, and it's like, you don't pay rent. You don't look. What do you do?
I guess it really depends what kind of startup you're talking. But.
We'll talk about startups in a little bit. I want to talk about Adam's thing. Deliver Zero.
Yeah.
Trying to get him on. He's shy. Anyway, so
I'm kind of shy too. You got me on.
You're not shy. You're a performer.
Oh, like sometimes if people are performers, like don't think that they're not shy.
No, but they could turn it on.
Maybe
turn it on.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, you're restrained, but I get sense in you. There's an inner tiger.
A very quiet tiger, yeah.
Very quiet
but
tiger.
Watch out.
Right, exactly. He's gonna hug you to death. We the hug gangsters. So your next move was a coffee roaster. You were in a shared space, a wood shop, precisely, roasting coffee, packaging elsewhere, all off-site. You lost those 2 spots, and then you working in another project that was more or less like freelance technical support for
some major coffee companies around town.
Like Intelligentsia was one of your biggest.
Yeah,
accounts.
Intelli was one of our biggest. We also did a lot of work for Illy Cafe, and a lot of the major roasters around New York.
And Intelligentsia was really like one of the first. They kind of led the way in terms of the direct trade, working with farmers, coffee farmers, and attempting to raise the quality of life and not going through the usual channels of supply.
Yeah.
And just delivering like a really, really awesome product starting in like the 90s, right?
Yep, definitely. They were one of the like forefronts of that change in coffee. Like the direct trade movement was definitely, they were one of the first companies. Stumptown was one of the first companies as well, right around the same time frame.
But Intelligentsia also had a really big emphasis on training people making the coffee to represent it too. So it was like the thing was survivable. It was like, we're doing this on this side, but like we need you as our soldiers to represent it the right way, because if it tastes bad, nobody cares. Nobody's going to buy a bad product just because it's like good for the world. So they attacked it on both fronts. And for me, like I'd always been into coffee. I grew up working in restaurants. So it was always a component. I was trying to think back to like the first real machine I worked on, and you get a kick out of this. This was like late 90s when I was living in Rochester. It was an Italian place. It was great. It was in an old Victorian home, essentially. And this guy, like the ground floor was the restaurant, and he lived upstairs. And he was from Naples and just total like egomaniac. But this thing looked like the Starship landed in the kitchen. It was like one of those super duper fully automatic machines from the 90s, but like all the components didn't work.
It's just
all
broken
the time.
all the time.
So it was just like they get it fixed and it would break. So like the milk frother, you were supposed to just
super automatic machines are known for that.
So I learned to be resilient and like negotiate. The thing was huge. It looked like the first computer. And like all these buttons and stuff. But like at the end of the day, you just had to work yourself and like pull your own shot and froth your own milk. So I learned to be resourceful as far as coffee goes. But then when I was like, okay, I really want a good machine at home. One, because coffee was getting very expensive, and I was just like, it doesn't make sense to give all this money away. But I just drink a lot of it, and I just want it right there. And just like with everything, I want to learn what's going on behind it. So when I got my first Rancilio Silva, what is it?
Sylvia,
yeah. The guy I was watching like YouTube clips of at the time and everything was only using Intelligentsia coffee, and he was like, this is the stuff, and this was like around 2000, 2001. And that was my first like introduction to them. So I kind of chased it. I got the machine and everything. And then like, boom, right after that, Ramin used to work at the Tea Lounge with my buddy, Kirk Shaneher. He's a guitar player that I worked with a lot. Kirk was working at the 7th Ave and 10th Street, the original Tea Lounge location.
Josh, what's Josh's last name?
I can't remember, but from Southside, right?
Yeah.
So they were all like, I was playing with Kirk at the time, and he's like, you got to meet this guy Ramin. So I meet him, and then Ramin walks into the wine store, and I'm like, oh, whoa. And he's like, oh, I live right here. So this is all like Windsor Terrace, super small towny Brooklyn vibe going on here. And then Josh and Ramin opened Southside on 6th and 20th, 19th, whatever. And I used to hang out there a lot. And Ramin was like, oh, yeah, I used a Sylvia to like test all my products and figure stuff out. And like at that point, he really like took over the Intelligentsia lab in Soho or whatever.
Yeah, Ramin's great.
Yeah. And then Josh worked with Steeplechase. Oh, I happen to have a Steeplechase shirt on.
I like it.
And I know Lynn and Keith pretty well. And when they were first, like, I don't think they were open yet. And I was like coming around, and Josh was there, and we like kind of reconnected. It was funny because he was showing them some stuff, and I was just there. We were talking and everything. And I said something about triple ristrettos, and they were like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Shh, just don't bother yourself with that. Don't listen to that guy. He's not right." So that was kind of like how I got started in coffee, and then connecting with Ramin. And then that relationship blossomed. We just, even once he moved to Bay Ridge, we like stayed in contact. And I just like always had this fantasy of opening a coffee shop using Intelligentsia so it was great when we finally did. And I got the big monster Rancilio, which was not my favorite machine, but it was very reasonably priced.
Right.
And he got me a great deal. And
you can spend $30,000 on an espresso machine if you want.
Well, now I fantasize about those, the Arduinos, it's got the scale in the, in the thing, and you can
very advanced.
You can time the angel share so it cuts the pump.
Yeah, you can just decide exactly how you want your shot to be, and it will in real time, make adjustments.
Those things are amazing, and those grinders too. They have like the heated chamber. And like I'm just like, oh my god! But yeah, what's that investment just
Fancy
for the grinder and the
fun.
machine? What
grinders
is that?
are like $4,000. Those kind of grinders are about 4,000 or so.
I thought they were more than that.
There's drip coffee machines now that are like over $6,000 too.
But that Arduino grinder that like heats the
burrs,
burrs.
I think that's like a $4,000 price point.
I thought it was more than that.
Yeah, we have one and for our events.
And those, right, you got that white one.
Yeah,
it's like really dope. And then the like a two group or 3-group machine like that is like
we use Sinessa's for our.
Those aren't cheap either, but those
they're like 16 or so.
Yeah. So you're talking about like solid $20,000 just for two pieces of equipment.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's if that's what your business if you're depending on coffee for the majority of your business. Like, that's not that much money if you think in the scheme of things, I would say if for a guy like me, it's a lot of money. But, in traditional investing in like a business,
right, sure, of course,
for the meat and potatoes of it,
right,
that's not much.
No, I spent quadruple that for Della. So
right, yeah.
But just like buying machines myself, I'm just like, wow, that's way more
no,
than
it's a lot to stomach if you're not.
But it does come down to the consistency too. Like what I was talking about, like how Intelligentsia put so much into it, like the equipment too.
Espresso, it's a finicky product.
It's alive.
And a lot of people don't realize that. They think that you just put the coffee in the machine and it's going to be the same every time. It
changes on the hour sometimes, right?
Yeah, you need a very detail-oriented person and somebody who understands flavor and how to make adjustments and is willing to check back in on the product over and over again and, make a change every time they need to, not necessarily just time-based, but, just a person who understands food and drink and balance. Balance is the most important thing to coffee to me.
But cocktails are the same thing.
Cocktails exactly the same. So there's a lot of parallels there.
Like you, I started more. I was doing more coffee, and definitely like working in kitchens, but also service as well, like working as a waiter, and when I bumped up to bartending, I just literally was like, it's just like a coffee drink. It's different ingredients, and it applied really well.
Yeah.
And same thing, someone just gave me a chance. I remember this guy I was making coffee at this restaurant in Tribeca, and he was like, you'd be a really good bartender. And I was like,
yeah.
Like, why don't you give me a try? And then like one day the bartender didn't show up for lunch and people were ordering like martinis and shit. And I was just like, everybody's like, what are you going to do? I was like, I got this.
Yeah.
And It was fine.
And
after
you have
that,
like sweetness,
I was a bartender.
body,
Yeah, it's the same.
acidity,
It's the same.
strength.
I love the coffee.
Like,
the cuppings.
those are all the same.
I love the cuppings because they're it's like wine notes. They're like, oh, notes of apricot, and it's like
I mean, I got something called a Q grader certification, and that's what it's all about.
Oh.
And like what that.
So you're like the coffee sommelier.
It's similar. Like
Whoa.
the reason that was developed is it's by the Coffee Quality Institute,
Right.
CQI, and what they are for. They're a nonprofit that tries to raise the quality of green coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, like if a farm in South America or wherever decides that, hey, we're not producing the kind of coffee that we need to be able to make the kind of wages that we need to for our farmers, then we can send our coffee to CQI. CQI is going to send out that coffee to 4 Q graders, and then we're going to roast and cup that coffee, and we're going to assign it a grade, and we're going to tell this farm what kind of defects that coffee has, what kind of score that's going to get, which means what kind of price they're going to get paid. And then, based on that feedback, we can also send a representative to that farm and give advice on how they can change their farming practices in order to help raise the wages that they can raise from their coffee. So it's a pretty important thing, it's kind of ridiculous to hear someone talking about like all of these minute grapefruit, plum,
tangerine pith.
Yeah, this is how people talk about coffee when they're cupping it, and to a lot of people that's just like ridiculous, but it does come from a great important place,
No, your job is so much more serious than I really thought.
It's just coffee too at the same time. Yeah.
Well, let's take one more quick break because I want to elaborate on what you got going on now, like some of the initiatives, and that was one of them, and really great insight. That's awesome, and we'll talk more in depth about that. So we're going to take one more last break. We'll be back in just a few. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web.
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
I'm the aptly named host of Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. Big nonprofit ideas for the other 95%. Fundraising, board relations, social media. My guests and I cover everything that small and mid-sized shops struggle with. If you have big dreams and a small budget, you have a home at Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. Fridays 1 to 2 Eastern at talkingalternative.com.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
talkingalternative.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Last round. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. We're going to finish strong here. So my boy Tim Tate was talking about currently what he's working on. We heard a little bit of his history and his hustle in the coffee and the beverage industry. But he's been working on quality assurance for coffee. He's basically a coffee sommelier. You have certification. You can determine whether a coffee tastes like grapefruit or tangerine. And don't argue with him or he'll hug you real hard. And you're currently at Think Coffee.
Yes.
Which has got this really great mission and track record of working with the farmers and the villages, improving their quality of life, like directly involved with that, but also helping to make sure they're getting best price for their quality and that for the best price for their coffee, and that the quality of the coffee is like world class, working with farming practices building schools, and it's a real solid initiative coming out of this company, who just started as like a single coffee shop in Williamsburg, right? It was like a little coffee shop.
Yeah. I mean, so Jason Scher is the CEO of Think Coffee, and he was an attorney in the 90s, working down in the financial district, and just kind of hated it.
He didn't like that?
He didn't like it that much. And he decided to start
to torture himself further, so he opened a coffee shop.
Yeah, well, he decided to start a cream cheese business.
Oh, right. You told me
it was called Jason's
about
Cream Cheese. He was trying to be like the Ben and Jerry's of cream cheese business.
Great name. Jason's
and so
Cream Cheese.
he had a walk-in in Williamsburg in his apartment, and he was making deliveries before he went to work as an attorney.
And the Department of Agriculture loved that.
I'm sure they did. Yeah. But I mean, that business didn't work out. But I think he met a lot of people in the coffee industry through that, and he decided to try his hand. So he opened a little coffee shop called Verb in Williamsburg, and for a number of years that was open, and then I think his rent jumped like 10 times or something like that.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and that was roughly 15 years ago or so, and he decided to start Think near NYU on Mercer Street. That's still our biggest, busiest location. And like the business was started with the thought of like think about where your coffee comes from, kind of thing, and like the business started as a fair trade coffee company, but through having meetings with fair trade in the basement at Mercer Street, we decided, well, I wasn't with the company at the time, but basically decided that fair trade wasn't doing sort of what it set out to do. And so sometimes we take issues with certifications because a lot of times people will see a little sticker on a bag and say, I'm going to buy that because that's a fair thing. And I don't mean to pick fights with Fair Trade USA or Fair Trade International. I do think that organization was started with the best of intentions. And I do think that it did some really important things to help change people's goals and address important issues. And it was really the beginning of people trying to do the right thing from the sourcing aspect of coffee. Coffee industry for hundreds of years has taken advantage of people at origin, the invisible people that pick the product and process it. And that side of the coffee industry is very foreign to most people, and is never seen. And most people just see coffee on a shelf and it's coffee, but it's grown on bushes. It's a cherry, it's a fruit. And there's a massive amount of work that goes into it to get that product even to the U.S. before it is roasted.
It goes into your fancy little cup.
I mean, there's coffee is like it's very complex, and there's so many stages that happen before you get to drink it or before it even gets roasted. And so we decided to start buying directly. We decided to start being an importing company about 10 years ago, and we felt like so we started paying twice as much as fair trade to farmers, which is great. Like fair trade, the price of fair trade, I believe, hovers around $1.40 per green pound of coffee. And that's not a ton of money. It's designed to help when the price of coffee crashes. And the price of coffee has crashed recently. And so most people in the world who grow coffee, there's like 5 million small farmers in the world for coffee. And most of those people have to pay about $1 per pound to produce that coffee. And so the price of coffee on the commodity market right now is right around that price. So you're basically like, if you're lucky, breaking even, most likely losing money. And that's most of the people.
From the farmer's perspective.
From the farmer's perspective. And that's the farmer, not even the people who work for the farmer. So if you think that like, hey, this farmer is like either breaking even or losing money, then you have to think about what does that mean for the people who are working for that farmer. And so that's where I think that fair trade, direct trade maybe like misses a beat.
They need to evolve.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I mean, everything's a progression. Like, exactly what you're saying right now. Like we, as a business, as a person, as a humankind, like we need to evolve in order to, stay alive. And that's what needs to happen in business, whether you're in coffee or in any kind of business. Like you can't just be like, this is how
we do
it works.
That's it. Yeah.
Like this has always worked for us.
That's
like
a death warrant.
Like, you can't think that way at all. And so that's the same way that we've been. So, we were importing for about 5 years, paying direct trade prices. And then we were saying, we're paying double the money of fair trade, but like it's only going to a farmer. And this farmer has 30, 50, 100 people working for them. And like, how do we know that money is getting to the people who actually pick the coffee? And so what we started doing is talking to those farmers, saying, we want to interview your farm workers. And so we interview as many farm workers as we can at each origin that we buy from. We buy from a very small amount of origins.
And you're public about it too.
We are. We're trying to be extremely transparent.
Yeah.
And we are trying to get more and more so very actively.
Yeah.
All
I think
the
it's a
time.
good move.
I did too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're like, it's the right thing to do. Number one,
right.
Number two, like people are starting to care about that more and more.
The world is very responsive to it now.
Yes.
Before we wrap up, I want you to talk about your personal initiative too with the coffee husk.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
just a couple of minutes. So
yeah. So I mean, I feel very passionate about working for a company that's doing good for the world. Personally, ever since I was in like elementary school, I wanted to have a positive environmental impact. Like my fifth grade project was cleaning up a beach. I hate seeing garbage everywhere, plastic everywhere. It's like there's like something like 500 billion takeout cups that get thrown away every year. New York City doesn't have a cup swap program. So in Australia, for example, there's a company called, I'm going to give them a little plug. They're called Husky Cup.
Yeah.
And the cups are made out of coffee husks. So it's a waste product at farm level. Then you take post-consumer plastic as well. Put those two products together. You come up with a beautiful cup that wins design awards. And also in Australia, it's used at about 500 cafes in a swap environment. So you don't have to take your dirty cup home and wash it. You can take your dirty cup back to the shop. Have it washed, sanitized. You can get a fresh one.
That's like the Delivery Zero thing. Which
Yeah.
is another friend of mine who's trying to get on the show.
Yeah,
so.
same concept. But it's very important that we adopt this as an industry.
Right.
This kind of concept. Like we can't just keep sending this endless stream of garbage out into the world. Like the food and beverage industry is a mess as far as that goes, and it's not improving much. And so we launched this.
I won't talk about your Facebook picture the other day.
Oh
That was great.
yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So we need to address it.
Yeah.
We are at all of our cafes offering a cup swap program. We have 11 cafes in New York. We're the first company to do this kind of thing, and we're hoping that it catches on to hundreds of other coffee companies in New York and in the U.S.
And in the
I hope
industry.
to have an international impact by doing this.
Boy, all right, can't finish a better way than that. So check it out. Think Coffee. Check out Tim. Look him up. He's a great dude. If you're interested in something like that for your company, he could certainly help. What's up, Ariana? We got to head out. We'll see you next Friday. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. Have a great weekend, everybody. Peace.
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
Do you run or are ready to open your own business? Hi, I'm Jeremiah Fox. I've been operating and opening small business for the last 25 years, and I'm the host of the new show, The Entrepreneurial Web. Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern Time for insights and stories on the nuances of running small business right here on Fridays at noon, talkradio.nyc.
I'm the aptly named host of Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. Big nonprofit ideas for the other 95%. Fundraising, board relations, social media. My guests and I cover everything that small and mid-sized shops struggle with. If you have big dreams and a small budget, you have a home at Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. Fridays 1 to 2 Eastern at talkingalternative.com.
Hey, all you crazy listeners. Looking to boost your business? Why not advertise on Talking Alternative with very reasonable rates? Interested? Simply email at info@talkingalternative.com.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network at www.talkingalternative.com. Now, broadcasting 24 hours a day. Talking Alternative.
Do you love or are you intrigued about New York City and its neighborhoods? I'm Jeff Goodman, host of Rediscovering New York, a weekly show that showcases New York's history and its extraordinary neighborhoods. Every Tuesday live at 7 p.m., we focus on a particular neighborhood and explore its history, its vibe, its feel, and its energy. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.